Hello and welcome. Today we're going to make a peach crisp and a peach cobbler. We're going to make pantry versions of this using just on-the-shelf ingredients because of the current situation. And these are both actually really great, even with just, cans and things like that. These both taste fantastic. So let's get the ingredients for the first one. Now, starting out, we'll make the peach crisp first. And the reason for that is that the other one just has a few more ingredients. And also, this is this one that's a little bit different in the texture. Now, generally what I'm trying to do when I make mine is I want it to be about the same texture as like the, that cinnamony sugar layer of the coffee cake. It basically should be about that consistency is what I'm shooting for. Alright, and for our crisps ingredients, we start with 1 cup flour, 1/2 cup butter, 1 can of peaches, 1/2 cup of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon cinnamon, a pinch of salt, roughly 1/10 of a teaspoon, and a teaspoon of vanilla extract. Now the reason I left that for last was this isn't really a place where vanilla extract is going to taste much different than artificial vanilla. So artificial vanilla is, if you have it, is probably good to use here because you're not going to notice any taste difference whatsoever. Oh yeah, quick note on the juice from your can. In the second recipe, we're going to use part of it, but you're going to end up draining part of it off. And as you can see here, when I turn mine around, I actually have a hot spot in my oven that I didn't know about, but now I do. And what happened was there was a little too much liquid in there and it spilled out. And once it boils over, it just kind of keeps going. So you'll see that that one actually ends up sitting a little bit lower and sort of compressing a bit. Starting with our flour, we'll add our sugar, our cinnamon, the nutmeg, and our pinch of salt, followed by our vanilla, which, as I said, you probably want to use generic here, and then our butter. And you can actually use warm butter in this place because it actually helps. You don't need it to be cold butter. It's not like you're making biscuits or flakiness here. So warm butter is perfect. Once we've got all of our ingredients in the bowl, what we're going to do is start to mix it. And the texture we're going for is a sandy beach, and I will be right back to that in a moment. What you're going to notice I'm doing with my hands is I'm using my fingers to scrape inwards, and then I'm using my thumbs to actually basically mix the butter and the flour and sugar at this point. Now, as I said, for texture-wise, we're actually shooting for it. You'll see, by the way, on the next one how much easier that makes things. And it actually makes it come together a lot faster, although this does kind of take a few minutes, but it's not really that bad. So the texture that we're looking for is basically a sandy beach. And if you've ever held like beach sand in your hand, you kind of know what that texture feels like. And it should crumble. So as you see me hold up here, I can compress it together and it'll stay together. But the moment you touch it, it crumbles and falls into the little sand essentially. And that's the texture we want on this one. We'll go with a different texture on the next one and we'll get to that in a moment. So once you got that sandy beach texture, we're set to go. Alright, now for our crumble, we are going to add one ingredient and we're going to change the texture a little bit away from the sandy beach that we were just at. So let's go over the ingredients. And now for our crumble, the ingredients are pretty much the same as our crisp, just one addition. So we'll start with 1 cup of flour, 1 can of peaches, 1/2 cup of butter, 1 teaspoon vanilla extract, 1/4 teaspoon nutmeg, 1/2 teaspoon cinnamon, a pinch of salt, about 10% of a teaspoon, 1/2 cup of sugar, and 1/2 cup of quick oats. That's the difference. This one has oats. Alright, let's put this together now. And now for our crumble, the ingredients are pretty much the same as our crisp, just one addition. So we'll start with 1 cup of flour, 1 can of peaches, 1/2 cup of butter, 1 teaspoon vanilla extract, Alright, and for the crumble, we just do the exact same thing we just did for the crisp, except this time we're adding oats. Now the oats are going to soak up a little of the moisture, so you'll notice I'm adding 2 teaspoons of the juice from the can of peaches. Now, the reason I do this is because you want it to be a little bit more of a tight consistency. It should hold together a little bit more for a crumble, so that the individual pieces crumble rather than it sort of dissolving in your mouth or that crisp, like the crisp does. So we want to take this instead of the sandy beach. As you can see here, we want this to cling a little bit more, so it's basically like a wet sandy beach at this point. And once you get it to this stage, we are good to go and ready to go in the oven. Alright, now with our crumble and crisp toppings made, I'm going to load mine into 2 individual serving ramekins. You could do a pie with this, and you would probably want to go with like 4 times the ingredients. So 4 cans and then 4 times everything else. And that should just about cover a pie plate. Now, the reason that we're using a sheet pan here is, as you saw in the beginning, some of this could overflow. In fact, it's very common to have it overflow. One of these, as you saw in the beginning, overflowed a lot. And the sheet pan protects us there. So, again, going back to the toppings though, the way you put the topping on is by doing what we did when I showed you what the texture should be. So you clump it in your hands like this, and you place it down on top, and it's going to sort of fall all apart and go into all the nooks and crannies. This also keeps air holes in it so that you get more of that light crispiness versus a really dense, hard crispiness. You do this with both types, and you just kind of give it a little bit more of a squeeze so it stays together and is a little more clumpy on the crumble. Okay, now, once we have our crumble toppings in place, I usually clean the sheet pan just to make sure nothing tends to get burned in there. We're going to stick that into an oven preheated to 375 degrees for 30 minutes, and then we're going to rotate the sheet pan that it's on so that we turn them around, and we're going to do the last 10 minutes at 400 degrees, and that's going to make sure we get that nice golden crumble top to it. And with that, we've made a crisp and a crumble from Pantry ingredients, so things that are more available right now during this current time frame. I really recommend you try this. They're both very good, and they're really nice, simple, basic desserts, and you can whip one out really fast. The actual hands-on time is so minimal. You can really do this without a problem, because you're talking maybe 5 minutes in the put together, and then the rest of it's all just sitting in the oven. So, I hope you enjoyed this, and if you did, please give it a subscribe and a like, and I hope to see you back for the next one. Have a great meal.